introduce yourselves and maybe share how long you've worked on Grey's Anatomy. And for Camilla, Kim, and Alexis, if the audience by chance hasn't seen the show, maybe give a little brief description of your character. Yeah, go for it, Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Raver. Thank you all for being here. I play Teddy Altman, who's a cardiothoracic surgeon. I've been on Grey's, I think, 10, 11 seasons, around there somewhere. And I'm going to pass it on to you.
Oh. Hi, I'm Camilla Luddington. I play Dr. Josephine Wilson, who is OB resident. I'm still a resident, right? Yeah, no. She started over. And I have been on the show 13 seasons.
Hey, I'm Alexis Floyd, she, her. I've been on Grey's for 3 seasons now. I play Dr. Simone Griffith, who just completed her first intern year.
Hi, I'm Meg Marinis, and this is, I think, my 19th season on the show. I've been the showrunner for the past 2 seasons.
My name is Zoanne Clack. I am the kind of medical person on the show and a writer, and I have been on the show for 22 seasons. Woo! But I'm only 35, so it's really weird.
So as we just saw, Grey's acknowledges climate many times throughout the show, but through its 21 seasons, it's also highlighted many other social justice issues, from racial inequities in medicine to LGBTQ rights to abortion access to veteran health care and many more. So for all of you, what has been the most impactful storylines that the show is focused on, either for you as a person or as a writer or for your character?
Look, I feel so fortunate to be in the position as an actor to be able to tell stories, and then lucky enough that they have a social impact. And I think what's interesting and one of the many geniuses of Grey's Anatomy is that we're able to tell stories in a way that is entertaining, and as you guys see, like weaves in comedy and also sort of the dire importance of these points to be discussed. And I think what's interesting is with each point that we bring up, it brings discussion, because most of the time, I mean, I would say pretty much all of the time in each of the aspects, there's sort of both sides to it, and it comes up. And so that when people are at home, they can really kind of battle out the different sides of it. And I think that that is really important in today's world, for us to discuss it and get to the nitty-gritty of it and really kind of understand the different points. And I think for me, I was fortunate enough to direct an episode 2 seasons ago that Meg wrote with Julie Wong called Training Day, and it was about women's reproductive rights. And that for me is extremely important and a really timely concern of mine. And I think it also was where the characters came together as women, and also the men on the characters came together to bring awareness throughout the story of what can we do, how can we make it better, how can we make it more accessible for women, and how can we pass along the information that we have so more discussion can be had on these points. And I think the more we can educate ourselves, and that we can educate ourselves in a way of entertainment is really, because you see people are so passionate about this show, and they're so passionate about the storylines. And so I think that we get to tell them through story. I think it makes it understandable and digestible, because I think sometimes when things get, sort of through news or social media, it's kind of hard to understand it on a certain level. And what I love is it makes it very accessible. So for me, I think it's really about women's reproductive rights, that episode.
Yeah. Anyone else?
So we both got to be part of an episode called Silent All These Years, which I don't know what season that was. Meg always knows. 14. It was this very powerful episode that we tackled sexual assault and rape. But I also feel like something that I was really proud of that we did recently, maybe last season even, is that Joe performed a D&C abortion. And we showed it step by step on ABC primetime TV. And I thought it was incredibly powerful and informative. I really loved the storyline of the woman who we performed it on. She was a mom already that had kids and felt like, she didn't want any more children. And it was just, I could just tell that it was a really powerful moment. And for me, I didn't know exactly how they were performed, so I was learning on the job. And I just felt like any woman or anybody watching out there that it was just, I think also maybe it was the first time that it had ever been shown on network TV. Yeah, so I loved that storyline.
Yeah, and it's really crazy actually because the actress Brisa is a member of the Hollywood Climate Summit community, and she has moderated a panel before. So that is one of my favorites
amazing.
too.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, no, I thought that felt like a very powerful scene to perform.
Definitely.
To echo Kim's point, I think one of the things I'm most proud of about being a part of this community is that it feels like it is an ecosystem that can hold space for really any cause. And so in that, there's so much opportunity to see the intersectionality of impact across causes. One storyline that really resonated with me recently, I think it was this season or the previous, but there was a member of the custodial staff at the hospital who had an on-the-job injury, and he was concerned that he wasn't going to be able to have the health care to support his care, which allows him to then work at the hospital that he cares for. And so, that sort of highlight on the importance of diversity in any space of care, in any space of activism, and how it is integral to the infrastructure of the place itself. And, we can't make an impact if we're not well. And, I think that sort of taking care of each other inside of the community as a way to make the ground fertile for growth and for change is something that always strikes me on our show.
That episode was written by Zoanne.
Get it, girl.
Do either of you have something to add? It's okay if not.
I'd like to echo everything that they're saying. I think the access to care stories, we've done it through women's health and also the underserved community, the uninsured community. There's so many different ways to tell those stories, and I'm really proud of those. I'll keep it short.
Yeah, I dig women's rights. That's cool. And then I also love just telling like the racial inequity stories. And I know it's not like a popular season, but I really thought we did the COVID season very well, because we did get to tell a lot of intersectionality stories, and we got to bring up the inequities in a way that was very just like there and in your face, and everybody was going through it. And I feel like it serves as kind of this beautiful time capsule for people who didn't go through it or were too young to go through it or forget, like lest we forget, like never forget that time. And I know a lot of people got tired of it. We got tired of it. We got tired of telling the stories, but it was so prescient and so kind of a remarkable time. And it was, I thought we did it pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that actually connects to my next question, which I was going to start with you, Zoanne. Now more than ever, it's important for our content to represent accurate and diverse storylines about science and health. And so why do you think it's important to represent how climate is affecting doctors and hospitals? And what positive viewer reactions have you seen to the show's science and health stories? And guys, Zoanne is an actual doctor. She is Dr. Zoanne. So I wanted to start with you, if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, Impact is my middle name. I mean, it's not my actual middle name, but it basically gives me like voice. The reason I can do this, where on the one hand, because I'm trained in emergency medicine, and I also have a master's in public health, so this is like everything I trained for, but on a bigger level. So it validates basically my existence of not being in the ER, like literally physically saving lives. So I always say, like, in the ER, I could tell like 2 people about diabetes. They might tell 2 people, and they might tell 2 people. So 20 people might know, but I do a story on it on Grey's Anatomy, and 20 million people have seen it. And if 10% of those people get something out of it, that's a lot of people. So yes, I love being able to tell these stories and to have impact and to bring all of the public health stories to light. And climate change has been one that just we've been able, like we literally spent years trying to figure out how to tell these stories. And like we were trying to figure out what's the medical impact, like how can we really fit that into our narrative and make it part of the stories that we tell. And then finally, as we've had many people come and talk about it, and it's become more and more, I mean, it's always been relevant, right? But as people have really stopped denying it and started like seeing, okay, there is a big impact, we've been able to really integrate it a lot more in the last few seasons. But as you said, going way back to the lady in the tree, apparently.
Yeah, there's an episode in season 5 where a climate activist is staying in a tree so that it won't get cut down, and she falls out of it, and that's why she's in the hospital.
I think they cut her down.
I just want to say also, I mean, it's so extraordinary what our writers do. I mean, to make these like medical emergencies and come up with these stories over the amount of seasons that we have, and they're so engaging and so entertaining and so funny and so pertinent. It's a really hard thing to do, and I just think that you all and the writers do such an incredible, because it's woven into the storylines of our characters that are so specific, but yet I find them so incredibly relatable. And you see our fan base are just such an incredible community and stand by this show. But in order to come up with these incredible storylines that are so sort of pertinent to the day, meaning the time that we're in, and have them resonate in a really meaningful, emotional way is a real testament to our writers.
100%. And actually, that perfectly connects to the next question, because I wanted to ask you guys about community, which I know exists very intensely on the show in terms of the doctors all supporting each other, but also on your set. And community is one of the #1 solutions to the climate crisis. So I was going to start with Kim and Camilla and Alexis, if you have any examples of moments where you felt like your character had the rest of the doctors come together for them in community, and that really made an impact on their lives.
Yeah, I just had it this season with Joe was in a convenience store, and there someone came in with a gun. It's Grey's Anatomy, of course. And she needed a cerclage, and that's what she wanted. And her and Link got into an argument over it, and we saw Bailey really swoop in and advocate for her, which she's actually done many seasons for her. And so I just think that was an example of community between the characters, and standing up for each other and advocating and all those things. And I loved that episode and those moments between them.
Sort of in a similar vein, I feel like the show finds a way of course, demonstrating the often horizontal structure of the hospital system, but then finding ways to learn and support each other vertically. There's a lot of whether it be the patient informing the doctor about the kind of care they want and how patient advocacy is essential to the entire medical practice, or even, when an intern is having an issue and then there's a moment of breakthrough and how that informs the doctor mentor about, what was getting in their way in terms of their learning, and how everyone learns in different ways and different styles. And again, that sense of diversity is actually such a key part in any growth. So I appreciate that on the show itself, there's this sense of community being much more about reaching across the table than having to ask permission up or down, and that learning comes from all directions and from unexpected places. And actually many times on our show, it feels like the patient is giving us more information about the healthcare system and the world at large, and how, again, the intersectionality, it demonstrates itself in individual stories, and hearing and seeing each patient is actually like an essential piece of medical practice.
There's this great voiceover Meredith has where she talks about, throughout the episode, about how doctors they'll just go to the mat for the patient and do everything in their possible existence to find the solutions. And then there's this great line, and I think Meg, you wrote this, but there's this great line where she talks about, and when they sort of bump up against adversity and feeling hopeless, that it's the time to turn to community, to find hope and inspiration. And I just thought that's so beautiful, and I think that you see it. That's what's so great about being in an ensemble, for the characters, and the moments where the characters might be failing, which is so great that we have those moments, because then others lift you up, and then the moments where you have the heroic moments, and it's through the sort of interdynamics between the community and that make the whole better. And I think that really resonates to exactly the work that you're talking about. And I think, to kind of go then into our community, I think because of what can I go into that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, because what we've been all managing in terms of, climate and the fires, and I have to say, I mean, you really, we all work hard, and then, for us, we're there so many hours, and it's just such a community. And when the fires happened in Los Angeles, it was just an incredible moment. I mean, I know it every day on set, and you also, when you're directing, you really just feel the community, and when you're acting on it, and and in COVID, everyone came. But for me, like during the fires, when really some of our crew members lost everything, and I think for us, each individual felt it as their own loss, and wanting to reach out and support to kind of get through it together. And that's just another example for me, is that what's reflected in our stories is reflected in our community as Grey's Anatomy, which is reflected in our, global taking care of one another. So I don't know, that's...
Yeah, do any of you have anything to add to that? I know you also did a lot for the community during COVID. Yeah, Meg.
Yeah, I believe it was during COVID that, I don't remember whose idea it was, but obviously the production was down for several months, and we had quite a bit of medical supplies on our set. So I think masks and protective gear we donated to USC downtown. That's where it went, right? Okay. And so that's, that was one way that we worked with the community, and with the fires. I think, it was just an astounding experience to witness the way, and I'm sure so many communities were like this here, but to see our crew rally around each other. I think at one point in our writer's office, the assistants had literally they would put together an assembly line of who would call FEMA for our crew members, who would be on the phone with the insurance commissioner. It was we had a whole catastrophe phone line bank set up, and these were people that lived in the middle of the city, and they didn't even know some of these crew members that well, and they were making phone calls and pulling resources together. And that's also the privilege of being able to work with people for 22 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think that a pitch. It's a great thing to see on TV too, is we really, people who work in climate storytelling like myself really try to encourage those moments of community around disaster, that it's not just that apocalyptic moment, but it's also how we all come together, and really demonstrating that to audiences, I think, is so important. And the community that you have off screen very clearly comes through on screen. So thank you for sharing that. And similarly, part of the reason we really wanted to focus on Grays is because it's one of the rare examples where you can really follow how social justice issues have changed in the minds of society, and you all reflecting that on the show. And in terms of, it's shown in climate and environmental issues, as we talked about, but do you all have any reflections on, that kind of arc in the current environmental realities over the past 20 years, but also any other storyline? Like, what is it like kind of tracking that over so long, and reflecting on how society is changing, seeing that?
Well, I'll just say that just in general, Grey's Anatomy has evolved with society tremendously just through this 22 years, because when we first started it, it was enough to have, people of color in positions of power and not talk about it. It was just seeing our own realities reflected on television. And that's what Shonda always used to say. It's like, this is what I see, and this is just how it is. And we didn't really talk about, like, what is the learned experience of a person of color in that society or in that hospital. And then as we grew, or as the world grew and people became more, as Trump likes to say, woke, the show also did, right? So we were able to reflect what these characters were feeling from the perspective of their backgrounds, right? Like what their upbringing was. And we could tell stories reflecting that and how they felt about it. And since, we had like this audience who was already loving our characters, they used to have those, which character are you kind of BuzzFeed tests and everything. So people really resonated with the characters, and that really gave us more freedom to be able to tell these stories and reflect people's reality. And, they always say, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So we have had a lot of, stories reflected back on us about, because of Bailey, I'm a doctor now, or because of, any of these characters, I'm in the healthcare profession now, and it's because, they can see themselves reflected. And that was something that, before Grey's Anatomy, it existed, but it really like blew up kind of after that. So we definitely evolved with society.
I love that. Kim or Camilla or Meg, since you have also been on many seasons of the show, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think teaching medical residents has evolved. Obviously, from the very beginning, just how the show began, it was an attending and an intern had a relationship. Clearly, that's not really how we tell stories anymore. I feel like that has evolved. Also, kind of, wellness. That's still an ongoing topic, I think, but wellness for people in the medical community, that I think we really started to concentrate on that more during kind of the COVID season, and the mental and emotional toll it takes to be in medicine these days, and how it's causing a lot of people to burn out. And so it's we got to take care of our doctors and our nurses. So that's one thing I think I would say, how medicine is taught.
I also think even just for me personally, Jo has been in black scrubs for the past few seasons, and it's just this, she kind of does this throwaway speech, I think, to link the first time she's wearing them about how there's a war on women's reproductive rights, and so now she's in black, and I just always like it every day that I put them on, because I feel like it's not something that we have to even address every episode, but just the visualization, the reminder of it on screen, I think is really great. So I love that we are able to weave these things in without always, banging the drum on them. And so that's just visually one thing that's sort of, is new-ish on the show that I really appreciate, that you can see every episode.
Totally. And for context, the OB interns used to wear pink, and so it was very like inherently feminine, and then Joe switched them to black on the show.
Yeah, we're all in black, right? All the OB.
GYN
Yeah.
department. Yes.
Yes.
I think talking about weaving in storyline and stories evolving, and I think for me, Teddy is a working mom, and being able to tell those stories of, and then also being chief of surgery, and how. That is definitely in the past. It's been viewed as, especially cardiothoracic surgery. I mean, women coming into that position and being able to represent the storyline of Teddy and the things that she's juggling and the biases that she encounters all the time, and then also what it means to be. Present as a mother and a wife, and also be a complete badass in what she does, and then also run the surgery department. So
And run Owen,
which
takes a lot of running.
and the whole department. So I think being able to tell that story, and also so that other working women, and especially in the medical and surgical field and of that level, that they're not alone, and that there's real stories and a lot of growth to be had, and that has been made. But to be able to tell that story for Teddy has been great.
Yeah, definitely. And Alexis, for you are a part of this new generation of interns on Grays, which anytime they bring in a new class, it's a big deal. So for you, what do you think your group brings to the show in reflecting the challenges this generation faces professionally or personally, and what issues like climate change or others do you hope the show continues to highlight?
Yeah, actually, to echo your point, Meg, I think the burnout issue is really potent. And of course, this is a generation that has a very consistent relationship with screens and inundated, information, and then also trying to dedicate themselves to this practice and the importance of being able to be present for that learning. I mean, it can't be overstated. And so finding ways to cleanse and rest, especially when there is this history of giving it your all the time, baked into many practices, and the medical field is certainly one of them. And literally the culture is such that every issue feels emergent, and many of them are, but then how do we regulate the nervous system? How do we turn to community? I'm excited to continue to see how our class navigates those dynamics. And then also to your point about the visual cues, I think that's so beautiful. And, on that front with in the climate space, I'd be excited to see us continue to sort of leave Easter eggs for our generation to pick up on, whether it be Simone's chasing Blue down the hall with a reusable razor, or we're talking about maybe like I think two of us have cars, but maybe we sell both of them and get an electric car and start carpooling, like little ways of having dialogue about saving our resources, because medical school, is tight financially, but also then it can pour back into the planet. It all works together. So I'd be excited to continue to find a lot of joy and, sense of humor around taking care of the earth and each other.
I love that. And Meg, you recently mentioned in a Hollywood Reporter article that you are going to continue putting climate themes into the show. We don't know how yet, but for you said also that there was a good audience response to the climate themes in season 21, and I was wondering if you could share some of those.
Absolutely. I think mainly I think I heard back on the heat, because there were so many. I don't know if they were actually defined as heat domes, but so many extreme heat wave events this year. And I'm not just talking about the fires, but I mean all across the country, and all of these hospitals just becoming inundated with patients, and doctors responded to us kind of with gratitude, in that we were placing such importance of the need for hospitals to develop protocols to prepare for this kind of thing, as well as to educate the public about what should and shouldn't be done during extreme heat crises, like how we can help prevent, so many patients from coming to the hospital, how we can prevent injuries. And I mean, even just getting out the fact that, crime increases with heat because of the mental toll. So it's just, that means maybe we need to be developing some mental health resources during rising heat, all things that were connected. And I feel like there's so much more that, we've learned through several of our meetings with these organizations that I feel like there's so much more that we're interested in that we couldn't fit into the space.
Yeah, definitely. And we have a little second part of this panel that we're going to dive into that more. But as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you all that are there any stories, climate or otherwise, that you've seen in your lives or in the news that you'd be interested in seeing represented more in any content? It could be Grace specifically, but just in general.
That's a great question.
I'm interested in learning more and diving into the storytelling around clean food access, community gardening, this idea that we keep us safe, we keep us well, and again, the sort of like horizontal support system and how joyful that can be, and like playing in the dirt and making food and sharing the food, like it all can work together, and that kind of like tactile relationship with the earth as a way of bringing community, having fun, regulating the nervous system for sure. But food is such an interesting piece to me. And then of course, like the food desert, ways to combat access as well. And I just think there's, we all eat food. It's like, it connects us so deeply and literally, emotionally, and internally. So that, and so much medicine comes from plants. So I'd be excited to continue to play in that space.
Yeah, I love that, the food aspect of it, because it's so interesting, because I think all of us want to do good, right? I mean, I think that's like an inherently kind of thing. And then there's that sort of overwhelming feeling of like, well, how do I make a difference? I can't even, and I think, again, because the fans just love hearing the stories and are influenced, and I heard this I'm not going to get into it because, maybe Meg, but it was like a really interesting point about veganism and whether you want to eat, maybe that's just a day where, you don't eat meat, but there was this quote that someone was saying about how actually by not eating meat, and I won't say it because it's, maybe we'll put it in the storyline, but how it has health benefits for certain men, and that's such an interesting concept. Like, actually, if you don't eat meat, there might be certain benefits. And so I just think there's also funny ways to impart how to help the climate, our climate. And so maybe that's we can also within some stories have fun so that people can connect to it, and it can bring joy, and it can bring a feeling of making a difference by just doing each little part.
That's amazing.
I know that was very vague and random.
But I was in though.
But maybe you'll see it next season.
I'll add additionally, there's been many studies and a few films done about how eating vegan also improves your performance in sports. So that's
a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
She means performance in other areas too.
Exactly.
But
I'm going to keep it clean at a clean summit. She's like, I can't end on that.
I know. I was like,
Meg,
anyone want to
take it away. Someone add something.
I'm not following.
I think that's a perfect ending.
Zoanne,
That's like a perfect ending to me.
That sounded
Okay. We'll wrap this part up here. I am going to invite our next two panelists to join Meg so they can dive a little bit into the writing process of this past season. But thank you so much, everyone. This is so fun. Cool. Take your water bottle.
Can we take our water bottle? I'm going to reuse it on set.
I love that. And we can go ahead and play those next clips. Thank you.
We're going to be here a while. shut down the whole bridge for the protesters. You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
You sure? You look weird.
Thanks.
So, I Spy or Murder Podcast?
Actually, there is something that I should talk to you about. So, is that trash?
Yeah! Stop polluting, start living! What? They're saving the planet.
By throwing trash or risking their lives bungee jumping?
Well, these events always attract a few rogue players, but it's the overall message that's important.
Just do your thing already.
Do you know what global warming has done to the insect disease vectors? The tick population has exploded. Do you want Lyme disease, Joe? The 10 hottest years have happened in the last decade.
We have an expected high of 108. That means a full ER. Lots of heat-related illness, especially amongst the most vulnerable populations.
Fortunately, we have some extra local doctors who have agreed to help us out. Please show them a warm welcome.
We have cool IV fluids, misters, and inflatable ice baths. Use them. Cold immersion is the fastest way to lower internal body temperatures.
All elective surgeries have been canceled until further notice.
It looks like your surgery just went up in flames.
Symptoms: cramping, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, headaches.
Take care of yourselves, hydrate, and we will get through this.
Hey, Chief, you got a minute?
No, but you're already here.
It's not about today. I'm sorry. I was only trying to help. You said that the hospital doesn't have emergency plans for heat domes. Well, it turns out that we don't have ones for wildfires, tsunamis, and a few other natural disasters, and they're only increasing with climate change. So I want to put together a committee to fill in the gaps.
Hello, I'm Adam Umhoefer. I'm a Hollywood Climate Summit Advisory Board member, and I work at CAA Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of Creative Artists Agency. I lead our climate and sustainability work there. I'm also a co-founder of Green Screen, which is a new industry-facing effort to engage talent, filmmakers, showrunners like our clients at CAA with experts and resources to effectively represent the realities of climate change in their storytelling. And I am joined here, again, with Meg Marinis. Thank you for staying with us. And also Meredith Milton, who is the creative director for Rewrite the Future, which is the Natural Resources Defense Council's project to support creators in telling entertaining stories that reflect our climate-altered world and the path toward a better future. So, as Ali mentioned, we're here to dig in a little bit in the process of writing these episodes. Grace has done such an amazing job of incorporating these issues over the years. But what does that actually look like? And how can we make sure that other shows are doing it as effectively and as well as Grace? So we'll dive right in. Meg, so you're busy last summer in your writer's room plotting out what the season's going to look like, and you decide you want to do a health and climate storyline. What prompts that decision? Why do you arrive at that idea?
Well, the finale that we had just ended the previous season with had wildfires in it, and we were very interested in kind of continuing that storyline and the effect on the community of Seattle. Our show is based in Seattle, and we just didn't want to pretend that never existed. We wanted to kind of continue that through line. And as we started to talk about it, we came up with this idea of the protest that you just saw up there, and at the same time, one of our writer producers, Scotty Brown, had run into you at an event, and Scotty came back to the writer's room and said, I think I found this great group that can come and talk to us about, the different ways that climate change is affecting health and medicine, and also how it's being seen in hospitals. And so we had this great meeting where y'all came to our writer's room and spoke to our writers, and defined kind of obviously actually what the issue of climate change was and what was happening, kind of the insect vectors. Link speech up there was definitely a lot of the information that we learned from you all, which was really fun to write. I could have written like 2 pages of that. We just kind of started a creative partnership where we were able to collaborate on the issue.
Yeah, so I meet one of your writers, and we're talking about this project, and we work closely with NRDC on this, and so we pull in Meredith and NRDC. Meredith, tell us when you get pulled in. You've done this many times on many different shows over the years, but use this particular show as an example to tell us the process. What does it look like when you get pulled into a writer's room like this?
It can take a number of different forms. I think this version was one of the most fun that we've ever done because we came in, as NRDC, and then we brought 2 specialists in emergency medicine, emergency room physicians, and 1 specialist from NRDC who is an expert in public health and has done a lot of work around all of the various impacts of, our changing planet on people's health. And so we brought all of these people together in the writer's room, and we had this really incredible sort of wide-ranging conversation about all of the impacts, including, heat, but then extreme weather, insect-borne illness, increasing air pollution. We talked through a lot of different narrative opportunities, and it was really fun from my point of view to see, the writers light up when the ER doctors were telling, stories from the field, because climate change and all of the environmental impacts that we're experiencing, they're so abstract. So what does that actually mean? Like, how does it show up in an emergency room? And I think, having the people who are doing it every day in the field talk about how it shows up and what it looks like was, I think, really illuminating for everyone. So after we had that meeting, then we all went back to the drawing board with the experts and with CAA and Melior, who partnered with us on this too, and we put together a really thorough little Bible of all of the ways that this might show up and all of the references and facts and resources that we thought the writers might need in order to represent these things authentically and accurately. We sent off that memo, and then after they went through the writing process, we also did a bit of script review and additional follow-up, just to, answer any questions that they had and make sure that everything was kind of showing up truthfully and accurately.
Yeah, and so you decide to go with this heat dome story, and I think this is one of those situations where sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And what people might not realize is some of these storylines are pulled directly from real things that happened. I mean, the cooling patients in body bags with ice. This is a real thing that Meredith, one of your experts, was able to tell the writers' room. Do you and the writers find it challenging to incorporate these real world things? How does this work in the creative process? Because everyone's always concerned about are we wedging this stuff in? Is it too much of a PSA? How do you approach the challenge creatively?
Well, I think there was one thing that we took a little too literally, but then we had to dial it back with when our doctors had to explain to us, no, it wasn't quite like that, and that was Bailey defibrillating, I can never say that word, the patient in the ice bath. I think we heard it and we were like, really? You don't get shocked? You just do it in the ice bath? And we took that and kind of ran a little too crazy with it. And then our doctors were like, no, this is what she really meant. And we had to kind of pull it back. But that was one of the real stories was someone going into cardiac arrest while being in the ice and the inflatable thing, which we got real inflatable things that they use during heat-related illnesses. We got those to the set as well. That was very cool. So, we always sometimes we hear something that maybe wasn't quite the real thing and we run with it. But, thankfully we have such an amazing team of medical experts that help. And I mean, there were, it's always kind of, you've got the dramatic storytelling aspect that we kind of need to adhere to. But, we've been going on for so long that we've kind of felt like we've kind of hit a sweet spot now in order to not make it a PSA. Sometimes if we've noticed that if you have people working at the same time as delivering dialogue that kind of has some of those messages, it's not as kind of, overtly talking to the camera and giving this message. But also I think, what was happening at the same time was while we were filming these episodes, we were dealing with extreme heat. I think when Camilla and Chris Carmack, when we're in that car, I mean, it was like 95 degrees near Long Beach or something. And I mean, they were putting like ice packs on their heads in between takes. I mean, it was all very relatable. We were all living through it. It was uncanny.
Yeah, and that's a great segue, Meredith. So we end up with this 2-episode arc about extreme heat. How what's the value of that? We are here at the Hollywood Climate Summit. We talk a lot about climate storytelling. In this specific case, give us an example of why a heat dome story, this extreme heat event, is helpful, is useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's extreme heat is really, really dangerous, and I think that awareness about the dangers of extreme heat is relatively low still. And what we have, the World Health Organization estimates that about 500,000 people die each year from extreme heat around the world, and in all likelihood that number is higher even. It's just a bit difficult to track globally. But when you have stories like this in an episode of Grey's Anatomy, it raises audience awareness of the dangers of extreme heat and also of the ways that you can deal with it, right? If you avoid going out in the heat, but then also if you notice someone who has the symptoms of extreme heat, there are simple things that you can do at home to cool them off, fill a bathtub with cold water or with ice, and just giving people the tools that they need to kind of build. I love the phrase from the first part of this panel, horizontal care networks. This is our world. This is how we live now, and how can we look out for each other? How can we take care of each other in our changing environment? The show has this incredible capacity to really empower its audience to take care of each other.
Yeah. Meg, Ali asked you about the audience response. You had said in an interview that people really responded. Some of my colleagues at Green Screen have been working with 2 different organizations, Action for the Climate Emergency and then Rare, to do audience research on the response to these episodes. So we'll share more about that as that becomes available, because it's still in its early stages. But already we know from the Rare study that the episodes boosted knowledge about health impacts of heat waves, and increased the perceived likelihood of them, and also the severity of these heat events. So it has proven successful in what you've just identified, Meredith. And some of the research is also showing that focusing on stories like this, in fact, boosts audience affinity for the show. So it's a win-win.
Thank you.
When we're talking about research like this and feedback, Meg and Meredith, what would be helpful for you to know? What would it be great to have, maybe represented statistically or in data, or how audiences respond and feel about these shows?
I mean, you kind of just spoke a little bit on this, but I think if we could have audiences, if we could find out whether or not the symptoms of heat stroke and heat-related illness were communicated to them, because I think that's one of the fastest ways to help the public learn how to help each other, is if they can define that, as well as I think educating people about what not to do during extreme heat events, so that we can kind of alleviate that burden that gets placed on hospitals. Because if all these patients come in during a heat dome, what about the patients that would be coming in at the same time? The resources get diverted and things like that. So I think really knowing what the symptoms of heat stroke and heat related illnesses, I think, would be really important.
Yeah, that's it for me too. I mean, I think it's just giving people the power to make the right decisions and sort of care for each other. And then, I think in the longer term, what you hopefully see are, access to cooling centers and things that can happen on a community basis, that people can organize and help look out for each other, look out for the more vulnerable populations. Are you checking in on your elderly neighbor? Are you checking in on your pregnant friend? Looking out for your pets, making sure they have enough water. I think all of our dogs, particularly in LA, are out on these long hikes sometimes in the middle of the day, and animals are vulnerable to heat illness too. So.
And what about within the industry itself? I mean, is the research helpful in making the case for?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think that obviously the first goal of the industry always is to entertain, but that happens through connection, through representing authentically what's happening in people's lives. And then I think that for, those of us who are looking at how do we do this, best, talk about these real issues, but also in a way that's entertaining. It's really helpful to know that the audience for the show that you did received it well, felt that they were seeing themselves on screen, understood it, and, you know, frankly, didn't reject it. Like, we're obviously living in a politically complicated time, and so figuring out how to talk about these things that really are sort of life or death issues for everyone, and figuring out how to talk about them in a way that just enables people to take in the information and know what to do, you know, kind of taking the stinger out of it is a really useful way to do it, and I think these episodes, you know, did that very effectively.
Yeah, and more to that point, you know, obviously these events are going to keep happening. They're increasing. This is a story of our time. Meg, is there anything you could say to other creatives in the room and watching that could encourage them to challenge themselves and their projects with including more of these storylines?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's one, invite these amazing experts to your writer's room, because I mean, there's so much I feel like that went into these episodes that we would not have known to do. I mean, just even there's even like lines of dialogue that you think, you know, are part of like a relationship conversation. But I remember like Joe throwing away a line of dialogue that says, "Do you know how many babies are born early because of extreme heat?" And you know, you think that she's arguing with her boyfriend Link, but also we're putting out a line of dialogue that is very educational, because that is true. There are more preterm deliveries with extreme heat. So it's I just say, you know, invite these people to your room, challenge yourself. Also look at your productions, look at your writer's room, and also, are you making the best example on crew? Like, can you have more reusable supplies on set? I think this year one of our crew gifts is we gave reusable silverware to everybody, because we were just watching things go into the trash, and so we did a cute little pouch that said Grey's Anatomy, and it had fork, knife, chopstick, straw, and people loved it. Our crew loved it, and also a hat because it's fun. So I think there's a lot of ways to be able to do it, but I really think getting these briefings into your writer's room really, really helps.
Yeah, there are so many resources available, whether it's NRDC or Good Energy or the Hollywood Climate Summit or Green Screen, so many resources available. So I think all would encourage everyone to take advantage of that. Thank you, Meg.
Of course,
thank you,
thank
Meredith.
you so much. Happy to be here.